Have you ever been told you were washed up? That you were no longer useful, no longer someone people looked up to? It hurts, right? But I'm going to tell you about how I turned it all around. You won't believe what happened to me when the general recognized my classified emblem. Trust me, this story will shock you. But before we dive into it, hit that like button, drop a comment, and stay tuned for more stories like this one. I'm Alexis Hayes, and my life story isn't what you might expect. For 29 years, I lived with people's expectations, mostly in silence, just pushing through. For most of my life, I was a soldier. I served my country with pride, faced battles both on the front lines and in my personal life, and came out standing tall. But that didn't mean I didn't face my struggles. People thought I was done when they saw my age, when they saw the marks of war on me, when they saw the scars I carried inside. The incident that would change everything started in the middle of a regular day, like any other. I had just finished a quiet walk through a park in Rockford, a town no one really cared about. I hadn't been home for long. The sun was low, casting long shadows over the benches and trees. It was peaceful, but my thoughts weren't. I couldn't help but remember the people who looked at me as if I was washed up. It had been over a decade since my military career had ended, but they still saw me as just a soldier who'd faded into the past. But they didn't know what I had in my pocket. Not yet. As I sat on one of those benches, I noticed a group of young people chatting nearby, their voices loud. They looked over at me, then whispered to each other, their laughter barely contained. They thought I couldn't hear them. Look at her. She's probably one of those old soldiers who thinks they still matter. One of them snickered. She's washed up. Those words hit me harder than they should have. I wanted to walk over and say something, but I didn't. It wasn't worth it. I was just about to leave when a man walked past the group and turned to face me. He wore an old military uniform, one that seemed familiar. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded, as if he recognized something. "Excuse me," he said, approaching me cautiously. I stood up, ready to walk away from the awkward situation, but he raised his hand. "No need to go," he said. "I'm General Thomas Dawson. I don't mean to intrude, but I couldn't help but notice something on your jacket." I froze. The general. I recognized his name. He was a well-known figure in military circles, someone who had seen more than his fair share of conflict. Why was he talking to me? "You probably don't remember me," he continued, "but you're wearing the same emblem I used to wear, the one only a few of us could ever get. The classified emblem." My mind raced. How could he know about that? That was something I kept hidden for years. The emblem was from a top-secret mission, one so classified that no one but a handful of us ever knew about it. I had hidden it away when I left the army, but here was this man, a general, telling me that he knew what it was. He saw the emblem. The group of young people who had been laughing at me earlier now fell silent. The general's recognition had put them in their place, but it also left me confused. How did he know? "Excuse me, sir," one of the young men called out, stepping forward. "What is that? Is she really who you say she is?" General Dawson didn't answer right away. He looked at them, then back at me. "You have no idea who she is, do you?" he said, his voice cold but calm. "She's not just some washed-up soldier. She's a hero you'll never understand." The young people exchanged awkward glances, and their faces turned pale. They hadn't expected that. I could tell they were regretting their words. But it wasn't enough for me. I wasn't going to let them off that easy. "General," I said, my voice steady but sharp, "you may have recognized me, but these kids don't know who I am. They don't know anything about my life. I've been forgotten by the world, just like you said. But now that you've seen this emblem..." The general turned to the group and gave them a nod, as if telling them to leave. They looked confused, but didn't argue. They shuffled away, leaving me and the general alone. "I didn't mean to embarrass them," he said quietly, but there was a knowing look in his eyes. "But I can tell that you've got a fire inside you. It's been a long time since I've seen someone like you. They're not the only ones who need to learn something today." I had a feeling this wasn't the last time I'd see General Dawson, and I was right. What he said next would change everything. But that's a story for later. The days that followed were strange. I couldn't stop thinking about the conversation with General Dawson. How did he know? What did he really see in me? I hadn't been active in the military for years. I was just an ordinary woman now. At least, that's what I told myself. But when he mentioned the emblem, it brought memories flooding back. The emblem I wore was something that few people knew about. It wasn't just any military decoration. It was a symbol of a mission so secret that even the president couldn't have told you what it was. It was a piece of history, a piece of my past, but I had kept it hidden, locked away in the deepest part of my soul. Only a handful of people like Dawson, knew its true significance. I had kept it hidden not just because of the danger that surrounded it, but because of what it represented, a past I was trying to forget. For years, I had been labeled the washed-up soldier, the one who had failed, the one who couldn't move on. People thought I was useless, but the general's words changed something in me. They made me realize that maybe I wasn't finished. Maybe it was time to show the world who I really was. That evening, I sat in my small apartment in Rockford, staring out at the darkening sky. The wind had picked up, blowing the last of the autumn leaves across the street. I should have been relaxing, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something big. Then there was a knock on my door. I stood up quickly, heart racing. Who could it be at this hour? I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door, and there stood a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, dressed in a military uniform, and he had a stern look on his face. "I'm looking for Alexis Hayes," he said, his voice firm. "Is this her residence?" I nodded, suddenly feeling a sense of unease. "That's me. What can I do for you?" The man glanced behind him, as if making sure no one was watching. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Lieutenant James Reese," he said, his eyes scanning the room. "I was sent here by General Dawson. We need to talk." My stomach tightened. Dawson? What was this about? Talk about what? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever this was. "Let's just say that what you think you've been hiding might not be as hidden as you think." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. Was he talking about the emblem? Had the general told someone about it? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my cool. Lieutenant Reese wasn't convinced. "I think you do, but we'll get to that later. Right now, you need to come with me. There's something you need to see." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him to leave me alone. But there was something in his eyes, something that made me feel like I had no choice but to follow him. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The general has arranged for you to meet someone. Someone who can help you, but you need to see them in person. And trust me, you don't want to be late." Without another word, he turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving me no choice but to follow. I grabbed my jacket and locked the door behind me, my mind racing. Who was this person I needed to meet? And why now? The night was cold, the streets dark and empty. We didn't talk as we walked. Lieutenant Reese's pace was fast, almost as if he knew something I didn't. I tried to keep up, but my mind was clouded with questions. I thought I had left the army behind. I thought I was free. But now, it seemed like I was being dragged back into something I couldn't escape. After a few blocks, we arrived at an old, nondescript building near the edge of town. It looked abandoned, but the lights inside were bright, and the hum of activity made it clear that something important was happening behind those walls. We entered through a side door, and Lieutenant Reese led me down a narrow hallway. At the end of the corridor, a door opened, and we stepped into a large, dimly lit room. I didn't know what to expect, but what I saw took me completely by surprise. Sitting at a table, looking over papers, was a woman I had never seen before. She had short black hair, sharp eyes, and a no-nonsense demeanor. But it wasn't her appearance that shocked me. It was the fact that she was wearing the same emblem I had once worn. The emblem I thought no one would ever see again. She looked up at me as I entered the room, her expression unreadable. "Alexis Hayes," she said, her voice cold but welcoming. "I've been waiting for you." Before I could speak, Lieutenant Reese closed the door behind me and left, leaving me alone with the stranger. The woman stood up and walked towards me, her eyes never leaving mine. "You've been living in the shadows, but it's time to step into the light. You've got work to do. And trust me, it's not going to be easy." I didn't know what to say. Who was this woman? And why was she wearing the emblem? "Sit down," she ordered, motioning to the chair across from her. "We have a lot to discuss." But before I could take a seat, the door burst open, and someone stepped into the room. I looked up and my heart skipped a beat. It was General Dawson. I froze. The general was here, standing in the doorway like he owned the place. The room, which had felt like an interrogation chamber moments before, suddenly felt even more suffocating. I didn't know what was going on. I had followed Lieutenant Reese here, thinking I was about to learn something important, but this felt like something bigger than I could have imagined. "General Dawson," I said, my voice thick with confusion. "What is all this? Who is she?" The woman, who had been sitting across from me, stood up slowly. Her eyes were sharp, but there was something in her gaze that made me uneasy. "I'm Agent Morgan Hayes," she said, her tone even but authoritative. "And I'm here to help you, Alexis. Or at least, I hope you'll let me." Agent Hayes? I didn't know anyone by that name. Was she connected to the same mission I had once been a part of? I glanced over at the general, hoping for some kind of explanation. "Please sit down," General Dawson said, motioning to the chair across from Agent Hayes. "We need to talk, and it's best if we get this over with quickly." I did as I was told, my mind racing with questions. What was happening? Why had I been brought here? The general didn't usually come to these kinds of meetings. He had always been a man of action, not words. But this time he was different. His usual stern expression was replaced with something more serious, something more urgent. "Alexis," the general said, finally breaking the silence. "I know you've been trying to leave the past behind. I know you've been living in silence, hiding your past. But now it's time for you to face it." I could feel the weight of his words settling on my chest. It wasn't just the past he was talking about, it was the mission, the emblem, the things I thought were buried for good. "Agent Hayes and I have been working together on a project," the general continued. "A project that requires people with experience, people like you. People who know what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves." I didn't know what to say. I had walked away from that life years ago. I had nothing left to give. At least, that's what I told myself. But the truth was, I'd always known this day might come. I just didn't know it would come like this. "I don't want to go back to that life," I said, my voice more firm than I felt. "I've put it behind me. I'm not the same person I was." Agent Hayes leaned forward, her eyes never leaving mine. "That's exactly why you're the one we need," she said, her voice low and steady. "We've been tracking a group of people who have been using military secrets for their own gain. People who have been manipulating the system for years, and they've gone unnoticed. But they can't hide forever. Not from us." I felt a chill run down my spine. Was she talking about the same people who had once been part of that classified mission? The ones who knew about the emblem? The ones who had left me in the dark all those years ago? "I don't know if I can help you," I said, my voice faltering. "I don't know if I'm the right person for this." The general placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Alexis, you're the only person who can do this. You have the skills, you have the experience, and you've got the strength that they don't even know about." I wanted to argue. I wanted to walk away, to say I couldn't go back to that life. But the truth was, I knew I couldn't just turn my back on it. Not when the people I cared about were still at risk. Not when the people I had once fought beside were still out there, doing who knows what. I looked at General Dawson, then back at Agent Hayes. They were both waiting for my answer. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. Agent Hayes nodded, as if she had already known what I would say. Good. You'll have your first assignment soon. But first, we need to prepare. The work we're about to do will change everything. I stood up, suddenly feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. I wasn't just stepping back into the past. I was stepping into something much bigger. And I wasn't sure I was ready for what was to come. Before I could say anything else, the door opened again, and Lieutenant Reese entered, a serious look on his face. "General," he said, "there's been a complication." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What kind of complication?" I asked, already fearing the worst. "We've just gotten word that one of the people we've been tracking is in town, and they know we're onto them." My heart raced. This was it. This was what I had been called back for. The mission was no longer a distant memory, it was real. And it was happening now. "Alexis," General Dawson said, his voice hardening. "We need to move quickly. Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate. "I'm ready." And with that, we were off, heading into the unknown, not knowing what awaited us, but knowing one thing for sure. The past had come back to find me, and this time I wasn't running. The cold night air hit me as soon as we stepped outside the building. It was like a slap to the face, a reminder that things had already changed. This wasn't just another day. This was a turning point. The mission that had seemed so distant in my mind now felt very real, very dangerous. General Dawson led the way, his pace steady, but I could feel the tension in the air. The urgency in Lieutenant Reese's voice when he mentioned that someone we were tracking was in town only made things worse. We had no time to waste. The sound of tires screeching on the pavement echoed through the streets as a black SUV pulled up beside us. The doors swung open, and Reese motioned for us to get in. "We don't have time to waste," he said, his voice tight. "We need to move fast." The drive felt longer than it should have. The city lights blurred past me, but my mind was elsewhere. I kept thinking about what had just happened, the decision I'd made to rejoin this world I had left behind so many years ago. I had convinced myself that I wasn't that person anymore, that I didn't need to carry the weight of the past with me. But I had been wrong. The past had found me, and there was no going back. As we drove through the quiet streets of Rockford, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. The tension was building, but I didn't know when it would snap. I felt like a rubber band stretched to its breaking point, ready to snap at any moment. Finally, the SUV pulled up to a dark alley. The streetlights were dim, and the area felt deserted, the kind of place where no one would notice you if something went wrong. The perfect spot for an ambush. I looked at General Dawson, who had a serious expression on his face. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Stay alert." We all got out of the SUV, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Something wasn't right. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as we moved towards a nearby building. It was a run-down warehouse, the kind of place that screamed trouble. But I knew this was where the enemy was. This was where it all came down to. We crept into the shadows, keeping our movements slow and calculated. Lieutenant Reese took the lead, and I followed closely behind him. I could hear the faint sound of footsteps in the distance. It was a small group, moving in a way that told me they were trying to be discreet. They were expecting something, or someone, but they didn't know we were here. I felt my heart racing as we neared the door of the warehouse. This was it. We were moments away from confronting the people we'd been tracking for months. The people who had been hiding in the shadows, pulling strings, using military secrets for their own gain. This was the moment I had been waiting for. And yet, there was a part of me that was terrified. I had no idea what I was walking into. Reese gave me a quick glance, then signaled to the rest of the team. We slowly pushed open the door, and the faint sound of a conversation hit my ears. It was low, almost a whisper, but I could make out some of the words. They were talking about the mission. They were talking about me. "You know she's here, right?" one of the voices said. "She won't stop until she finds us. She's a threat." A chill ran down my spine. They knew I was here. They knew I was coming for them. But how? Who had told them? Had they been tracking us all this time? The thought made my blood run cold. Before I could process the situation, a door on the other side of the warehouse creaked open. A figure emerged from the shadows, stepping into the dim light. It was a man, tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his face. He was dressed in black, the kind of tactical gear that made him look like he was ready for a fight. "General Dawson," the man said, his voice low and rough. "I see you brought your little army with you." The tension in the air was so thick I could almost taste it. I took a step forward, my body instinctively getting ready for whatever was coming next. I had no idea who this man was, but he didn't look like someone I wanted to mess with. "You're wasting your time," General Dawson said, his voice steady but full of warning. "This ends tonight." The man chuckled darkly. "You think it ends tonight? You don't even know what you're up against." The moment he said those words, everything changed. Suddenly, the quiet space around us exploded into chaos. Shots rang out, the loud cracks echoing through the warehouse. I ducked instinctively, but the sound was deafening. People scrambled for cover, shouting commands, trying to make sense of the madness. General Dawson grabbed my arm and pulled me behind a stack of crates. "Stay down," he shouted. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to steady my breath. This was it. The fight was on, and there was no turning back now. I peered over the edge of the crate, my eyes scanning the room. I could see the man with the scar moving, dodging behind crates, firing shots with deadly precision. His team was scattered around the warehouse, working together like they had done this 1,000 times before. I knew we couldn't just sit back and wait. We had to fight, we had to push forward. I reached for the gun I'd hidden in my jacket, a weapon I hadn't touched in years, but now I had no choice. But just as I was about to stand up, I heard a voice in my ear. "Alexis," General Dawson said, his tone urgent. "There's something you need to know. This isn't just about us. This is bigger than you think." Before I could ask what he meant, another round of gunfire rang out, and everything around me went dark. The world went silent for a moment. My ears were ringing, and I felt the familiar rush of adrenaline as my body kicked into survival mode. I had been in situations like this before, but something about this moment felt different. There was something dangerous about the group we were up against. They were organized, skilled, and relentless. I blinked a few times, trying to focus as the dust settled around me. The gunfire had stopped for a moment, but I knew it wouldn't last. The silence was temporary. I could hear the heavy footsteps of the man with the scar moving closer. His team was regrouping. I had to act fast. "Stay down," General Dawson hissed, pulling me further behind cover. His grip was firm, but there was urgency in his voice I hadn't heard before. "They're not going to stop. We need to find a way to get out of here." I nodded, trying to steady my breathing. I had been through firefights before, but this one felt different. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was personal. These people had made it personal. I peered over the top of the crate, cautiously scanning the warehouse for any signs of movement. There were shadows moving in the far corners, but I couldn't make out who they were. The man with the scar was nowhere to be seen, but I knew he was still out there watching us. "We need to split up," I whispered to Dawson. "If we stay together, we're an easy target. We need to create confusion." Dawson hesitated, but only for a second. He understood. "Fine. You take the left side. Reese and I will cover you." I didn't wait for further instructions. I moved swiftly, staying low to the ground as I darted from one piece of cover to the next. The shadows in the warehouse felt like they were closing in on me, but I kept moving, keeping my eyes sharp for any signs of the enemy. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't afford to let fear take over. The lives of everyone on this mission depended on us being able to outsmart these people. I had to do my part. As I moved toward the left side of the warehouse, I saw a flash of movement from the corner of my eye. A figure, I froze, my hand gripping my gun tightly. Was it one of our people? Or one of the enemy? I ducked behind a stack of boxes and waited. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. Then, in the blink of an eye, the figure came into view. It was the man with the scar. He was walking slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. My breath caught in my throat. I needed to make a move and fast. I leaned out from behind the crate, taking aim. But just as I was about to fire, a voice rang out from behind me. "Don't move!" I whipped around, startled to see Lieutenant Reese standing there with his gun drawn. His face was tense, his eyes wide. "Reese, what are you doing here?" I hissed, trying to keep my voice steady. "I came to cover you," he said, his voice tight. "But now we're in even deeper. We've been compromised. They know we're here." I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean, compromised?" "Someone in our team, someone we trusted, has been feeding information to them." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Betrayal. It was the last thing I expected. I couldn't believe it. Who could it be? We had been working together for so long. Who would sell us out like that? Who? I demanded, my mind racing. Who's been betraying us? Reese didn't answer right away. He looked around, checking the shadows. "We don't have time to figure that out right now," he said. "We need to keep moving. We're outnumbered." Before I could argue, a sudden burst of gunfire erupted from the other side of the warehouse. The sound was deafening, and the force of it made me flinch. "They're coming," Reese said urgently. "We need to get out of here, now." I didn't hesitate. I followed Reese as he led me through the maze of crates and debris, my heart pounding in my chest. The sound of footsteps and gunfire echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. It felt like we were running out of time. As we reached the back of the warehouse, I saw an exit door. But just as we were about to make a run for it, a figure appeared in front of us, blocking the way. It was the man with the scar. "You thought you could just walk away," he sneered, his gun aimed directly at us. "I don't think so." I could feel the heat of the barrel against my skin, but I didn't flinch. This wasn't over. Not yet. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "You're wasting your time. You don't know who you're dealing with." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," he said coldly. "And you're not leaving here alive." My heart raced. This was it. It felt like the end was closing in on me. But I wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Just as I was about to make my move, I heard a shout from behind me. "Alexis, move!" I didn't have to think twice. I dove to the side, just as a barrage of bullets sprayed through the air, narrowly missing me. Reese had opened fire, creating a diversion. The man with the scar was momentarily distracted, and I took the opportunity. I rolled behind a stack of crates, my gun raised and ready. I didn't know if I could stop him, but I was going to try. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about making them pay for everything they had taken from me. But before I could make another move, a voice echoed through the warehouse. "Enough!" It was General Dawson. I looked up, surprised, and saw him standing at the far end of the room. His gun was raised, but there was no tension in his posture. He seemed calm, almost like he was in control. "You've had your fun," Dawson said, his voice steady. "But this ends now. Alexis, Reese, we're leaving. Now." I didn't question it. I didn't need to. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The man with the scar, the people who had betrayed us, they were all going to face justice. As the gunfire died down and the tension began to lift, I realized that everything had changed. This mission, this fight, wasn't just about me. It was about making sure that the past never came back to haunt us again. And with Dawson's leadership, we were going to make sure of it. We had survived the night, but I knew the real battle had only just begun. The warehouse was silent now, except for the soft echo of our footsteps as we made our way out. The adrenaline was still coursing through my veins, but the fear had started to settle. We had made it out alive. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The people we had just faced were only the tip of the iceberg. They had been part of something much bigger, and I had no doubt we were going to encounter even more danger before this was all over. General Dawson, Reese, and I walked out into the cold night air, the sound of sirens faintly in the distance. I could see the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, but we had to move quickly. We couldn't stay here for long. We weren't safe yet. "Get in," Dawson ordered, pointing to a black SUV parked on the side of the street. "We've got a new location to head to. It's time we regroup and plan our next move." I nodded and got into the back seat, my mind still racing. What had just happened? Who were those people? And why had they been so determined to stop us? There were so many questions, and I didn't have any answers yet. All I knew was that we had barely escaped with our lives tonight, and I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep running. Reese slid into the front seat and started the engine. "We're heading to a safe house," he said, his voice steady but tired. "It's a small location outside of town. We'll be able to lay low for a while, but we need to move fast." The SUV sped off into the night, and I looked out the window, trying to calm my thoughts. The city passed by in a blur, but I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. This mission was no longer just about surviving. It was about taking down the people who had been using military secrets for their own gain. People who didn't care about the damage they caused. As we drove, I couldn't help but think about the man with the scar. The way he'd looked at me, like he knew exactly who I was, like he had been waiting for me. I had to know more. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to stop until I got them. The ride to the safe house took nearly an hour. It was a secluded spot, hidden away from the prying eyes of the city. As we pulled up to the small cabin, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. For the first time that night, I felt like I could breathe again. But I knew that feeling wouldn't last long. We were far from safe. We piled out of the car, and General Dawson motioned for us to follow him. Inside the cabin, the lights were dim, but it was quiet, too quiet. I felt a sense of unease wash over me as we entered. It was supposed to be a safe place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. "Stay alert," Dawson said, his voice low. "This place is secure, but we can't take any chances. We've got to plan our next move." I nodded, my senses on high alert. It wasn't just the people we were up against that worried me. It was the fact that someone in our own ranks had betrayed us. I couldn't stop thinking about Reese's words earlier. One of us had been feeding information to the enemy. But who? "Reese, you stay with Alexis," Dawson continued. "I need to make some calls. We need to know exactly what we're dealing with. I'll be in my office." Reese and I exchanged a quick glance before he nodded. "Got it." We settled into the main room of the cabin, sitting in silence. I could feel the tension between us, thick and unspoken. There was a lot we hadn't discussed, but I could tell he was just as unsettled as I was. We had made it through the night, but something wasn't right. The betrayal, the ambush, it all felt like a puzzle that we couldn't quite put together. "I need to know who's behind this," I said, finally breaking the silence. My voice was steady, but I could hear the determination in it. "I need to know who's been pulling the strings. We can't just keep running. We need answers." Reese looked at me, his expression hardening. We all want answers, but rushing in without a plan is a sure way to get ourselves killed. We need to think this through carefully. "I know," I said, my tone softening, "but we can't sit here forever. They're going to keep coming for us, and I'm not going to wait around until they take everything from us." Reese didn't say anything for a moment. He just stared at the floor, deep in thought. Then, finally, he looked up at me, his eyes full of resolve. "You're right," he said quietly. "We need to move, but we need to do it smart. We'll figure out who's behind this, and when we do, we'll make them pay." I nodded, feeling a sense of determination settle in my chest. I wasn't afraid of them. I wasn't afraid of the fight that was ahead, but I was afraid of losing control, of being forced into a situation where we had no choice but to act recklessly. We'll get them, I said. But we do it on our terms. Reese stood up and walked over to the window, looking out into the darkness. I don't think it's going to be as easy as you think. I didn't say anything. I knew he was right, but I wasn't going back down. I had already lost too much. And I wasn't going to let these people take anything else from me. As the night stretched on, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The fight was far from over. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone stand in my way. The morning after the chaos of the warehouse felt like a heavy fog had settled over everything. The night had been long, and I barely slept, my thoughts racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the face of the man with the scar, his cold, calculating gaze. I couldn't get it out of my mind. Something told me he wasn't just a soldier or mercenary. He was something far more dangerous. And the worst part was, I didn't know who he was working for or what his ultimate goal was. The cabin, though secure, felt too still, too quiet. The weight of the situation hung in the air, and every small sound made me jump. We were far from safe. I could feel it in my bones. General Dawson had left early, already on the phone making calls, coordinating with the few trusted allies he still had left. Reese had gone with him, leaving me to keep watch in the cabin. I stood by the window, watching the surrounding forest, listening for any sign of movement. The sun was just starting to break through the thick canopy of trees, casting a golden light over the landscape. It looked peaceful, too peaceful for the storm that was about to hit us. I turned away from the window and walked to the small table where we had set up our equipment the night before. Maps were spread out, pictures of the people we were tracking, and notes about the weapons we had recovered from the warehouse. We knew we were dealing with a network, but how deep did it go? How many people were involved? The sound of a car approaching snapped me from my thoughts. I quickly moved to the window again, my hand instinctively going for my weapon. But as the car came into view, I relaxed. It was General Dawson, driving the same black SUV we had used to get out of town last night. He pulled up and stepped out, his expression grim. Behind him, Reese followed, his face shadowed with the same weight of worry. They had learned something. I could feel it in the air. "Dawson," I said, my voice low but steady, "what did you find out?" He glanced at Reese before answering, his tone serious. "We've got a bigger problem than we thought. The people behind this aren't just using military secrets. They're after something much bigger, something that could change everything." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "There's a plan in motion," Dawson said, his eyes locking with mine. "A plan that goes far beyond just us. We're not dealing with simple criminals. This is a global operation. And if we don't stop them, everything we know is at risk." I could feel the gravity of his words settling over me. My hands clenched into fists. I had known things were bad, but not this bad. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about protecting everything. Our country, our lives, everything we had fought for. "So what's the plan?" I asked, my voice firm. "How do we stop them?" Dawson took a deep breath and walked over to the table where we had the maps laid out. "We need to find out where they're getting their information from. Whoever is feeding them intel is the key. They've been tracking our every move, and they're always one step ahead." "We have to stop them," Reese added, his voice low. "If we don't, they'll come after us again. And next time they won't miss." I nodded. He was right. They were getting closer, and we couldn't keep running forever. We needed to take the fight to them on our terms. "We can't afford any more surprises," I said, my voice sharp. "We need to find who's been feeding them information. We need to cut off the supply." Dawson nodded, his eyes narrowing. "That's exactly what we're going to do. But we have to move quickly. Time is running out." As the day went on, we spent hours going over plans, strategizing, and trying to piece together the information we had. But no matter how hard we tried, we kept hitting dead ends. There were too many variables, too many unknowns. Every time we thought we had a lead, it turned into a trap. Nightfall came too quickly. We were no closer to a solution, but we couldn't stay in the cabin forever. The longer we waited, the more vulnerable we became. We had to make a move. "We're leaving tonight," Dawson said, his voice quiet but resolute. "We're going to find out who's behind this. And when we do, we're going to make sure they never come after us again." Reese stood up, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "I'm ready." I felt my heart beat faster, my mind racing with the possibilities. This was it. We were going to face the enemy head on. No more running. No more waiting. "We go in fast," I said. "No hesitation. We take them out before they can get to us." Dawson gave me a sharp nod. "Exactly. We'll move at dawn." As the hours stretched on, I sat by the table, going over everything one last time. I couldn't stop thinking about the man with the scar, the way he had looked at me, the way he had known who I was. He wasn't just another enemy. He was someone from my past, someone I had once trusted. But trust didn't matter anymore. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to stop until this was over. As we prepared to leave, I looked at Dawson and Reese, my resolve hardening. "Let's do this." We packed up our gear quickly, each of us knowing that the next few hours would change everything. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for everything we had left. When we left the cabin, the world outside was dark and quiet. It was the calm before the storm, and I knew that the storm was coming, fast. We didn't have much time. The next move would determine everything, and I was ready. The night was heavy with the scent of rain as we moved through the woods surrounding the cabin, keeping to the shadows, careful not to draw attention. General Dawson, Reese, and I made our way toward the location we had planned to raid. The tension between us was palpable, but it wasn't just the mission that weighed on my mind. It was the finality of what was to come. We had been pushed to the edge, and there was no turning back now. It felt like everything had led to this moment. But I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something bigger, something deeper was happening. The clues were there, scattered like breadcrumbs, but the full picture still hadn't come into focus. Who had betrayed us? Why had they targeted us? What were they really after? The mission we were walking into was supposed to bring us answers. It was our last chance to stop the group who had been tracking us. The man with the scar, his team. These people had been one step ahead every time. But this time we were the ones calling the shots. This time we were going to end it. As we approached the facility, the night grew quieter. The soft rustle of leaves beneath our feet seemed louder now, but we kept moving forward undeterred. The building was an old warehouse, abandoned by most, but still operational for the people we were hunting. The dim glow of security lights flickered from the top of the building, but the shadows swallowed the rest. It was a perfect place to hide in plain sight. General Dawson signaled for us to stop, and we crouched behind a low wall, waiting for the next move. "This is it," Dawson said, his voice low but sure. "We take them out before they even know we're here. Reese, Alexis, we go in through the back. Keep it quiet." Reese nodded, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the building. I could feel the determination in his stance, but there was something more, something I couldn't put my finger on. We had all been through a lot, but there was a shift in the air tonight. We were no longer just trying to survive. We were taking control of our own fate. We moved through the shadows, staying close to the building side. As we approached the back, I could hear the faint hum of machinery and voices coming from inside. The enemy was close, but we still had the element of surprise on our side. That wouldn't last long. At the back entrance, Dawson motioned for us to hold. He checked the door, confirming it was unlocked. He gave us the signal to move in. With guns drawn, we slipped inside the dark warehouse. The place was huge, filled with crates and old equipment. The air smelled of dust and rust, but the tension in the air was thicker than anything else. We moved quietly, every step calculated, every breath held in anticipation. The voices we had heard earlier were clearer now, just ahead of us. We crouched low, creeping closer to the source of the sound. As we neared the edge of a large stack of crates, I spotted them, two men talking in low voices, completely unaware of our presence. I motioned to Reese, who nodded. We didn't need to speak. Our training had made us a seamless team. The plan was simple. We neutralized the two men and moved forward. No hesitation. I took a deep breath and sprang into action, moving swiftly and silently. I was on the first man before he even had a chance to react. A quick strike to the head, and he went down without a sound. Reese was right behind me, taking out the second guard with equal precision. We didn't stop to check the bodies. We had no time to waste. Dawson gave us another signal, and we moved deeper into the warehouse. But something was different now. I could feel it, an unsettling shift in the air. It wasn't just the men inside the warehouse. It was something else, something watching us. As we reached the heart of the building, the floor seemed to tremble beneath our feet. I glanced at Dawson, and I could see the same realization settling in his eyes. We had been walking into a trap. We weren't the hunters anymore. Without warning, the lights blazed to life, flooding the room with a harsh, artificial glow. The sound of doors slamming shut echoed through the warehouse. We were surrounded. A voice crackled over the loudspeakers, cold and distant. "Did you really think you could just walk in here and take us down?" The voice was unmistakable. It was the man with the scar. I spun around, scanning the room for any sign of him, but he was nowhere to be seen. "Get ready," Dawson growled. "They've got the place rigged. Don't let your guard down." It happened so fast, I barely had time to react. The floor beneath us gave way with a loud crash, sending us tumbling down into a lower level of the warehouse. I landed hard, my body aching, but I quickly pushed myself to my feet, trying to steady my breath. "Reese! Dawson!" I shouted, my voice cutting through the chaos. "Are you guys okay?" A groan came from Dawson, followed by a curse. "We're fine. Just a little shaken. Stay sharp, Alexis." I didn't waste any time. I was already moving, scanning the new room for threats. It was even darker down here, the shadows deep and suffocating. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. But something was off. The noises weren't coming from just one direction. They were coming from all around us. "Get to cover," Dawson ordered. "They're closing in. We have to finish this now." I dove behind a large metal crate, just as a barrage of gunfire erupted from all sides. Bullets ricocheted off the walls, but I stayed low, my heart pounding in my chest. The enemy was here, and they weren't holding back. I could hear the man with the scar's voice over the intercom again. "You should have stayed away, Alexis. You've made a terrible mistake." I clenched my fists, anger surging through me. He thought he had us cornered. He thought he could break us, but he was wrong. I wasn't going to let this be the end. Not when we were so close. Not when we had come this far. I could hear Dawson and Reese moving in sync, taking positions and returning fire. We were still a team, and we weren't going down without a fight. As I peeked out from behind cover, I saw the first flash of movement. The man with the scar was approaching. But this time we weren't the prey. We were the ones ready to strike. The final confrontation had begun.